So just to get started, my name's Jeremy Smith. I'm an architect at Biloski Cleveland, and my colleague Sam Meyer and I will be presenting on architectural modeling. Uh, our our ambition for this part of the presentation is just to share some of the diverse modeling programs and outputs that are in the architectural profession, and kind of inspire you guys to think about how we're going to do the presentations for groups. Sam and I are part of the ACE Collinwood team. We've been joining in on a lot of these things, but we're happy to finally present. So architectural modeling can be digital, which is renderings, physical, which are scaled models that are more tactile that we bring to meetings and share with clients and often leave behind, or virtual, which is simulated space. You know, whether it's augmented reality or virtual reality with a headset, we can do a lot of things with the models that we create. So to get into digital modeling, which I think will be a large part of what we do as a group, we've got 3D modeling programs, rendering engines, and post-processing, which are all things to consider when creating a presentation. So some of the main 3D modeling programs we use at Biloski are SketchUp, Rhino, and Revit. SketchUp has long been one of my favorites, largely because of its accessibility. It's free to use online for students, and it's really easy to kind of jump in and get your hands dirty. So this is just a screen capture of a model that we're working on in SketchUp, and as you can see the interface. Now this is SketchUp Pro, and SketchUp Make will look a little bit different, but the basic idea is there with, you've got toolbars that have all sorts of different commands that you can use, materials, ways to organize models such as through the outliner, and we can actually set up views that we can make renderings from, or make the basis for renderings from. So this is a model where you can really see some quick output that overlays maybe some MEP and some design content. A great thing about SketchUp is that you can produce beautiful cuts, whether they're in section or plan. And so this is that same model that's been post-processed in Illustrator, but you can get an idea of how you can do something very beautiful without having to do something photorealistic. And that's always an option. And it's easy to communicate. The great thing about views like this is it helps our clients envision space, because I think a challenge that we always have as architects and designers is that nobody reads 2D drawings. And, part of it is about how we take our technical and our design language and merge them together so that, clients can really take ownership of the designs and understand what they're getting. Wonderful thing about SketchUp is that you can do many iterations really quick and easy. So whether it's a library, or in this case, um, a hub of a business center that's got, dining facilities and stuff like that, you can see all the different types of models we did early on with some context. Rhino is another 3D modeling program. It gives us the ability to look at some very complex geometries. So this is the Edgewater Beach House, and you can see the roof is really complicated. And our Rhino model, we were able to edit the surface pretty easily, and we actually sent this to the contractor to kind of coordinate the fabrication of this, which turned out really beautiful. So we use Rhino for things that are more complicated, and all of the programs can kind of give us a similar output. Revit, which is probably something you've heard of but haven't gotten to play around with too much. Revit is our building information model where we do most of our document production. And this is a 3D view of the Tri-C Metro Campus Center that Sam and I worked on. And so you can see, both some of the technical hatching, the context. It allows us to export models as we work on them. Sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad, but we get some really cool stuff. We don't always have to do things that are, like I said, photorealistic, and these are out of our 3D model that went into our construction drawing.
Question.
Sure.
So the new building at Tri-C, how did they connect the tunnel underground system together?
Well, it's really cool. So and not to get too deep into it, but the campus center was the only building on campus that wasn't connected through the podium, underneath the podium. So it was surrounded by a moat, almost like a medieval castle. So it was really easy to kind of fill it in, and then just really complicated to deal with waterproofing and building over. So, unfortunately, it was kind of like a fortress to begin with, but that allowed us to fill it in real easily. So and there used to be called the campus mile, which allowed people from the rec center to actually run a mile under, like without having to go outside, and that was so the short story is it was a moat and it was easy to fill in.
Yeah, basically we just made that lower level of the building much wider than it used to be, and that kind of allowed you to just fill in the space that wasn't there before.
Yeah, hope that's a short answer to fill in the gaps. So this is just the views from that campus center that show how that 3D model can turn into something that we share with contractors to make sure our design intent is followed when we get into CA, construction administration. We have rendering engines, so oftentimes what comes out of programs like SketchUp, need to be massaged a little bit before they go in front of a client to look a little bit more finalized, especially with projects that we're doing fundraising with the client to help actually pay for the construction. So this is a really cool set of images. Sam had been one of the initial people that worked on Enscape in our office, and the views above are actually the digital model, and the views below are the final photographs. So what the digital model allows us to do is to take some of these more complicated design ideas for parents to understand in a school and see how they would actually, deploy in space. And this is the Mandel School, which is pretty awesome. We also use a program called Twinmotion. This is not far from the site you guys are working on, and this is a project I've been on for a while, but you can see how a SketchUp model that we were looking at early on can very easily turn into a photorealistic image that can help with fundraising for a nonprofit. And Magnet's a really cool group to work with, like the Cleveland Foundation and others in Midtown. And Twinmotion is a great program that we also use to make animations. Post-processing. So post-processing is taking the images that we create out of Enscape or SketchUp and adding people. And some of the great things about post-processing is it allows us to add notes and a diverse cast of characters that we might not be able to get out of the original program. So a few examples, Adobe Illustrator, and this is just a view of the interface of Adobe, because I think in general all the Adobe programs look the same, in a sense that you have toolbars, you have your all of the things you can do, like your pens and your paintbrushes and layer manager. So whether it's Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, you kind of have a consistent interface so that as you guys decide to work on them, and there are free programs for students and trials available online, you can do all sorts of cool things. So this is just an example of a project where I literally took a photo of a sketchbook and then just drew on top of it for a meeting that was happening with the client, and it worked really well. In Illustrator, we can also do more diagrammatic, less photorealistic things, and this is for a furniture system that we designed for the Cleveland Public Library and our facilities master plan, and one of the libraries that we designed. So a lot of it is about explaining the steps of the design process to the public. And these guys worked out really well, and it's just a matter of doing some overlays in Illustrator with color blocks to make something look a little bit more developed than just line work. This is the campus center, and you were mentioning the moat that was around it. So these are our set of process diagrams we did to explain to the Cleveland Planning Commission, how we were actually going to engage the community. And again, this is all simple Illustrator, taking the model that we have and just overlaying some color blocks and putting in some arrows. I mean, that's to downplay the work that Sam and I did for probably weeks to put this together. But there's a lot of really cool things you can do simply without having to use a high-tech, expensive program. Photoshop is one of the other Adobe programs that you might use. There's like Photoshop Elements, and this is the Tri-C Metro Campus Center where we post-processed images like the light tornado and the people, and probably the sky to some degree with some awesome light, I guess, light glow effects around the building. So Photoshop's great. The difference between Photoshop and Illustrator is that Photoshop is rastered, so it works in like pixels per inch, and that's essentially like little dots. So if you think of like little pixels over a large screen, when you zoom in too much, you might get fuzzy images if they're at a low quality. Whereas Illustrator works in more a vector-based language that's about points and lines, and that's how you get a lot crisper graphic design-oriented materials. Both are easy and fun to use. Get into physical modeling, so we use a hot wire foam cutter, laser cutter, and 3D printer. A lot of these are easily available at like the ThinkBox and other public groups that host fab labs, such as the Tri-C has one downtown. We use the hot wire foam cutter to make quick massing models of projects, and this is just a series of studies on a laser cut base that we were able to do something really quick and cool to assess different programmatic options. 3D printers, you guys have probably seen some of these. Maybe you have them in your school. The Ultimaker is a very popular, product that you can purchase, and the model, the 3D printer on the right is actually a homemade printer. And funny enough, that's the printer that we use the most, that one of our employees actually made in grad school. So it's really cool. Some of the things that we do with it are to create small models of like context, so you can see a house in the background. In the foreground is a piece of furniture that Sam and I actually designed using the 3D printer for Tri-C. And this is an image of kind of the final super furniture that was installed. It was something that we worked through with fabricators and reps in the college, and certainly the 3D models worked really well to to get buy-in from the Tri-C staff. This is a laser cutter. It's very similar to the one that's at ThinkBox. Usually laser cutters are attached to a laptop or desktop in some way, where you'll import your line work into a program, and then that program will take probably the three line types that you have. That's either a cut, a score, or an engrave, and determine the depth of the material, and you can cut things that might take you a lot longer to do by hand. Some examples, and these are really developed, so hopefully they're just inspiring more than thinking you have to jump into this level of work. This is for a competition down at Kent State, where we actually laser cut the topography of the existing site. And I think laser cutting topography is probably one of the best uses for the laser cutter. And then also adding a lot of detail to context buildings without having to spend too much time actually doing it by hand. So this is a cool model. It's chipboard and wood, and then there's some plexi in there in the middle that is kind of cool. This is a model for the MLK library competition, and Sam actually worked a long time on this, and some of this is laser cut plastic and along with chipboard. And so there's a lot of really cool overlays you can do between color, digital photographs of aerials, and different materials that have some depth to them. And then virtual experience to round it off is two programs we use are, or the program we use is Twinmotion, which is through Unreal Engine. And this is really like gaming software. And it's pretty amazing that now a lot of architects are switching to gaming computers instead of traditional HP or Dell because of the graphics cards that you actually need to run these programs. And then just to finish it off, I want to share with you, this is one of our more recent animations for a client. It's for that magnet project in Midtown. And this is basically a 90-second video that gives you an idea of kind of how all these 3D modeling programs can come together, whether it's Illustrator like this image with some massing on top, or looking at the post-processed Illustrator and Twinmotion effects. So this animation was made for our client to help fundraise. And this is the renovation of actually an ex-CMSD building that's been empty for a number of years. And it's actually been gone from a middle school to a military school at one point. It was also a school for students that were in trouble, I guess you could say. And it's a really awesome project. And hopefully this goes a long way in getting them to their goals of making the building a reality over the course of the next year.
And the cool thing is you're seeing this as a YouTube video now, but we can actually put a VR headset on with clients so they can actually experience the space. We do that a lot. I'm personally a gamer, so I really enjoy that their disciplines are starting to cross and I get to play around with the VR headset. So for me, that's where I like, you're almost creating a video game out of the environment, to have people experience it. So for me, it's exciting.
Yeah, and with that, I will turn it over to Dominic.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Let me make sure I can share my screen here. So my name is Dominic LaPuma. I'm a designer at Bostwick Design Partnership, which is an architecture firm in downtown Cleveland. I have my colleague Megan here too, if you want to say hi.
Yeah, hi, I'm Megan. Been with Bostwick Design for about 9 years, and we're gonna, I think, show you a little bit of a tutorial here with SketchUp.
Yeah, so there's 2 PDFs that we added to the chat for the students to reference. The first one is just SketchUp basics that I'll go over, and then the second one is a quick demo of a bridge to construct in the software to kind of give you a feel for how to use the software. The first pop-up window, the welcome window, that opens up when you open up SketchUp. The important thing to choose is the correct template. So they have metric and imperial units, so just make sure you choose the template that has feet and inches. We typically like to use the one that says architectural design. So when you open up SketchUp, just to give you a feel for how to move around, the middle scroll wheel on your mouse is the most important component. So if you can see my cursor, wherever your cursor is pointing, when you scroll, it'll zoom out or in, depending on where your cursor is. There's also this orbit tool to be able to move around. So if you click in on your scroll wheel, you can orbit around the model. And then there's also a pan feature. So if you hold shift and the scroll wheel, it'll move up and down or side to side. So all those 3 combined are helpful to be able to move around the model. And I have the finished version of what we're going to be constructing today, just to give you a sense of the basic tools and functions of SketchUp. And I think, Megan, if you can just kind of read me the instructions as we go through it, that'd be great. I wanted to note too, so it's pretty simple, the axes here that you see. So there's the red line running across, that's for the x-axis. We have the green line representing the y-axis, and then the 3D axis of the z-axis running up and down. So with that, I'll go ahead and start constructing this bridge.
Yep, and like Dominic said, these instructions are loaded into the chat, so you should be able to recreate this after the meeting. So the first step is to create a 12-foot by 72-foot rectangle using the line or rectangle tool.
Okay, so this pencil is what represents the line tool. It's basically just like sketching with a pencil to draw a line. You can see it start to turn red when it's running along parallel to that axis. And then there's this length bar at the bottom that shows the distance. So if you click, you can type in the 12 feet for the length. And then I'll run it up in line with that green axis, the 72 feet. So I'll type that in, 72 feet. And then you can actually, if you click on that point, it should align with it, so you don't have to type in the distance again. And then when I connect those points, it'll automatically create a surface. Another way to create this is starting with the shape itself. So I can click on this rectangle. There's some other basic shapes in here. And I can draw it the same way as the other rectangle, except I'll type in both of those dimensions, the x being 12 feet 0 inches by 72 feet 0 inches. And that should give me the same rectangle. So just something to keep in mind with any software, there's always multiple ways to achieve the same thing. So it's just kind of finding out for yourself what's the most efficient way for you to achieve that. And another good thing to note is how to delete things. So I can select this whole surface, and you can do a quick command by clicking delete or backspace on your keyboard. So we can move on to the next step.
So using the line tool, draw a line offset 12 feet from each end.
Okay, so I'll usually start at the endpoint to get that 12 feet. I'll type in 12 feet. And now there's a point that should be at 12 feet. And then I'll do the same on the other side. Okay, so now we have two lines that are offset at 12 feet on either end. And you'll see when I start to select these surfaces, it divides it into 3 different surfaces now based on where those lines are.
So next is using the paintbrush, color each end of the rectangle.
Okay, so for the paint tool, it's pretty intuitive. There's just a paint bucket icon up here. If you click on that, it'll actually let you paint those different surfaces that I highlighted earlier. There's these default trays up here that should show up, and you can add different ones. There's layers. The one for the paint tool that we're going to use to paint a material on here is under the materials tray. And we're going to go under colors, and I'm just going to select this red color for now.
And then using the push-pull tool, extend each end 20 feet.
Okay, so there's another icon for this, the push-pull tool here. If I select that and I hover over each of these surfaces, I can click and it'll start to push or pull that surface. And it's similar to what we did when we drew the rectangular surface. I can just type in the distance that I want, and it was 15 feet, you said?
20 feet.
20 feet, okay. And what's nice too is it'll create alignments with all the other elements you have. So if I drag this up and hover over this other surface that we already pulled up, it'll align with that so I don't have to type in the distance again.
And then using the push-pull tool, again, extend the middle section 15 feet.
Okay, so again, I'll click on this middle section and I'll type in the distance 15 feet.
Using the line tool, draw a horizontal line and a perpendicular vertical line in order to draw an arc using the arc tool.
Okay, so yeah, we're going to try to achieve this arc on this surface here. I'm going to start at a point here and go down, let's say 2 feet to start the top of the arc.
So our
I'll
buildings, is it better to draw buildings inside of SolidWorks than like other AutoCAD softwares?
Is it better to draw buildings in software like this rather than AutoCAD? Is that what you asked?
No, like other ones like Inventor or something.
I'm sorry, in what?
Like, is it better to make 3D models in this software and not other software like Inventor?
Gotcha. Yeah, especially for earlier on, you can see how quick it is to model 3D in SketchUp. It's definitely more efficient than trying to do it in a software like you said, like AutoCAD, or even Revit for that matter at this stage of the design. Those softwares are more geared towards when you're starting to really develop how you're going to construct it and getting into more of the refinements and details of it. So I would definitely,
Just to chime in too, we've used Inventor, like it's really good for like certain, it's really good to send to a manufacturer to do stuff because they can take like exact dimensions and stuff. So Inventor specifically, you'd probably use it in conjunction to something like this of, okay, so say you want to do some very specific railing detail on this bridge. Inventor would be great for that, where this is more of the general form, if that helps explain the difference.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in. Does that help, Nadej?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so for that arc, we just drew that top line, which is really to get the midpoint for the top of the arc. So there's this another icon that represents the arc tool. We're going to use this 2-point arc. So I'm going to start with this point and this point, and then it'll create the arc as I pull it up. And then you can see as I drag it up the face up to this line, it lists that midpoint of that horizontal line at the top that we created. So if I click on that, now we have our arc. And then Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to start to get rid of the lines that we don't need.
Yep.
Okay. So you can see all you have to do is click on an element like the line to select it, and it'll highlight it in that blue color. To select multiple things at once, you can hold the control command, and you can see there's that plus sign that's showing up next to my cursor. So if I click on another line, it'll add it to that group. If I accidentally click on something that I don't need, if you hit Control Shift, it'll add a minus sign, and if you click, it'll take that away from the group. So I'll go ahead and delete those 2 lines. And then I think I can delete this line at the bottom. And as you can see, when you get rid of a line, if it completed that surface, it'll also get rid of the surface. I think that's it for that step. Is that correct, Megan?
Yeah, and then using the push-pull tool, extend the arch to the other side to leave a void shape.
Okay, yeah, so we want to fill in the rest of the bridge at the base. So we're going to pull this surface to the other end. So now we have that arch at the bottom. And then in order to fill it in, I'm going to use my pencil line tool to complete this surface on this side. And then I can get rid of those elements again. If I click the bottom line. So now we have that arch form.
And then add lines to your to your red shapes there to create an equal rectangle on each tower.
Okay, so I think I want to go maybe 2 feet offset from either side. So I'll create a line there that's 2 feet off. And then that says on edge 2 feet. So I'll do the same on this side. And another quick command that's helpful, if I select these 2 lines, I can copy. So if you do Control C and then Control V to paste, just like in a lot of other programs, I can just copy that over and you can see this line that's aligning it with what we did on the other side. So it's just another way of not having to draw it again on the other side since you're duplicating it. And then I believe we'll take the push-pull command to lower these ends to align with our surface on top here.
Yep. And then draw 2 horizontal lines at the midpoint of the inside of those towers. Yep.
Okay. So we're going to complete the walls on either side of the towers. And you can see it's snapping to that midpoint. And then I'll do the same push-pull tool to drag those across to meet the other tower. Okay.
And then use the paintbrush tool to assign concrete for the road and a brick or stone color for the walls.
Okay. I think in the PDF, the step after this is to get rid of the lines. I think it makes sense at this stage to get rid of the unnecessary lines before we paint the surfaces. So I'll go ahead and do that step first before we paint it. Okay, so let me get rid of these lines. Okay, so for the top of the bridge, we can just use under the materials tray. There's a lot of different folders for materials we can use. I'm not sure with the free version online what's available. This is the pro version, but you should be able to load in materials as well. So I'll go under asphalt and concrete, and I'll use this polished new concrete material. So I just clicked on the paint bucket. If you select the material and paint on that surface, it will paint that surface. And then for the bridge, we'll use a stone material. So we'll use this stone material, and I'll go ahead and just paint all the surfaces of the bridge that we want that stone material with. Okay, so now we have more of a good looking bridge here.
And then the last step would be to add components like people and boats and the water.
Right, okay, so yeah, one of the other trays is this components tray. In SketchUp, there's this 3D warehouse, which is kind of like an open source place for people to add all of the elements that they've created in SketchUp. So there's a lot of different objects that are already modeled that you can just add to your model and manipulate. So I'll go ahead and add a couple people. Maybe I'll choose Steve here. If I select him, he'll show up here, and you can just add him based on what surface you want him to show up on. And it's a 2D element, but as you can see, wherever I orbit, he'll show up. Oh, and I see I forgot a surface here, so I'll go ahead and paint that. Okay, so you can continue to add a lot of other different people to populate your bridge here. I'll go ahead and add the shape for the water below, and I'll go ahead and just draw that in. And you can see when I completed the lines, how it automatically filled in that surface. And if I go back to the materials tray, I can go to this water folder that has a lot of different types. And I'll choose this one. And then under the components in that 3D warehouse, you can search for different objects. So I'll type in a boat here, and you'll see there's a lot of different objects that people have made. So I'll go ahead and choose that one. It loads. So it'll download it, and then should show up. If you find it's facing the wrong way, there's also this rotate tool I can use to rotate them. And there we have it. I think we got our bridge with the water and the boats. So obviously you won't be, maybe you'll be add a bridge to your project, but we thought this was just a good way to get familiar with the commands and to just start diving into the software and get comfortable using it, see what you can make.